I would think that if Gotham City's problems were primarily philosophical, I wouldn't bother calling Batman. I would just call Chris Long, and we would have no problems. Well, Chris talked to you about general education and the types of learning that go on inside the classroom. I want to talk to you for a few minutes about another really important facet of learning, and actually, my case is made here very palpably. Here we are on a Sunday, and all of you who are here because you're confident that you are here because you have a great chance to learn. I grew up in a small town in northern Pennsylvania called Smethport, and each fall, it was a really big moment for us as students. We got a brand new tablet at the beginning of each year, and the tablet was not an iPad. It was a tablet made of paper, but it still was a big deal. And on the cover of that tablet was a saying that I still remember quite well. It said, "Learning maketh a man fit company for himself." Today we would say, a little more inclusively, learning will make you fit company for yourself. And I'd like you to think about your education beyond the classroom in two different ways. And I would ask you to think about, is your education at Penn State inclusive of three spheres? So we've just talked about the curriculum, the academic learning outcomes that your academic major has. Of course, we have learning outcomes associated with general education, and hopefully in the near future we will revamp those. Outside the classroom, you may not know that Penn State has well-designed outcomes, very intentional outcomes for the kinds of things that we hope that you'll learn outside the class. I don't have time today to go into those, but if you look at edge.psu.edu, you can see what those outcomes are. The third sphere is one that I think many of you actually don't think much about, which is your own personally created curriculum. The kind of curriculum that ought to include your own learning goals that are specific to you. So if we take these one at a time, the first message I want to share with you is how important I think it is, and this really follows Chris's talk, the importance of you having agency in these various spheres, these three spheres of your education. The first decision you'll make, many of you have already done that, is to decide what your major is. Within that curriculum, then, you'll have a chance to select your electives and, as Chris urged you to do, really make good decisions about selecting general education that will aid you in the fullest ways. I agree with Chris that general education is the most important, timeless, and sustaining part of your education. At my age, when I look back at my undergraduate education, it really was the components of general education that were most important for me. As Ruth Mendham said earlier this afternoon, opportunities for engaged scholarship is also a really important part of this. And you can choose to be involved in some kind of research or service learning that benefits a community external to Penn State. That's how I would define engaged scholarship. This is the list of items that we think are part of the co-curriculum at Penn State. And I would ask you to just quickly look at this list and think about how well you have intentionally engaged with these. Are there some of these items that you haven't made it your business to be a part of? Are all of these part of your co-curricular experience outside the classroom? So have you been involved in really intentional interactions with faculty, with service learning? Are you really focusing on expanding your interest in cultural events and studying abroad, as Ruth mentioned? Earlier today, you heard talks about diversity, about the LGBT community, about international students at Penn State. And I would say those are really important components and ought to be important components of your education. So when you create your own, and I hope you will think about this, create your own personally created curriculum here, set your own learning goals, determine what you want to do to expand your skills. Maybe you want to improve your skills with multicultural competency. You've heard several messages today about how important that's going to be for each of you when you graduate. But I also want you to think about your character and your values as something that doesn't just happen naturally. You've really got to work on those things. You have to understand what it is that's important to you and why. And finally, critical thinking, I would suggest, is a really important outcome of a good undergraduate education. Strategies that you can use: create your own reading list. Think about the kinds of things that you aspire to read. You might not get through all of those, but set that list in place and really think about how you want to broaden your own education. Ruth before mentioned travel. I think that is really important. For my during my undergraduate years, I've really benefited from being exposed to wonderful independent and foreign films. And I would encourage you, if that's not something that you do, to take advantage of. And finally, when you're looking at news sources, seek diverse news sources. I chair Penn State's student newspaper readership program, but we have newspapers from almost every country in the library, and we have digital resources that allow you to access all kinds of news sources where you can triangulate information and really make good judgments about that. If you think about the tapestry of your education at Penn State, I would suggest you could look at it in three spheres, with the curriculum, the co-curriculum, including faculty interaction, study abroad, leadership, and then your curriculum, your own learning goals that are independent, the kinds of things that you customize for yourself. Now, if you take this three-sphere paradigm that I just talked about, I would ask you to now look ahead for the next 20, 30, 40 years at Penn State. Many of you know that there's a goal at Penn State to increase our enrollment for the world campus to 45,000 students. And many of those students are going to be traditional age undergraduates like many of you. So with that idea in mind, how are we going to ensure that those students get the full opportunity for education that each of you have? And the area that I'm concerned about is the co-curriculum. Many of you who are here today, I know many of you, and I know that you're engaged in so many other kinds of out-of-class learning activities that are really powerful for you. Well, how can Penn State ensure that that growing population of world campus students will likewise have the opportunities to connect with the co-curriculum? Those of you who are student leaders here, think about what you might do to engage those students in your own organizations, in the kinds of things that you're involved in. Even a program like State of State in the future. How can we do a better job at helping world campus students become part of the planning of an event like this? Everyone who's been involved in planning this has learned so much from it. And it's the kind of thing that I think really makes someone become truly a Penn Stater, the kind of education that we know sets Penn State graduates apart from others. So I want to encourage you to think about that in your discussions today. How can we do a better job at engaging distance learners in the Penn State co-curriculum? A final thought that I have really ties in with themes that you've been hearing all day today, which is the importance of cognitive dissonance. My colleague, Pat Terenzini in the College of Education, talks about dissonance as encounters with challenging ideas and challenging people. Sam Richards, first thing this morning, talked about how he runs right toward people who have different points of view. And I think that's really an important hallmark of thinking about your own education, that you ought to seek out this kind of dissonance. In my own work in student affairs, I think reflective thinking and reflective writing is really important. Many of you have probably thought about developing a blog, a way that you can write reflectively. I think you should do that. Penn State has a really simple project that you can access, sites.psu.edu, and you can start your own reflective blog. And the last thing I'll say about this is that there's a really important element in learning called meaning making. And meaning making comes when we put together disparate bits of information. We're all challenged by dissonance. And when we assimilate that dissonance, that's when we engage in meaning making. You've heard this saying before, a ship in port is safe, but that is not what ships are built for. And I think as learners, you ought to think of yourself as a ship, and you ought to get out of port once in a while, get out of your comfort zone, and seek dissonance in every way that you can. This university is a wonderful learning laboratory. There's so much to do here, and lots of opportunities for you to confront challenging ideas and challenging people. A few questions for your discussion. What is your most powerful learning experience at Penn State? This question was asked earlier. I would ask you, where did it occur? I've asked dozens of Penn State graduates about their most powerful learning moment. And I'm sorry for the faculty colleagues who are here today. No one has ever pointed out a moment in a classroom as being the most important transformative experience. They have talked about interactions with faculty or relationships with faculty that were really important, but they often talk about a seminal out-of-class learning experience. How will you become the architect of your own education? From this moment on, how will you take full agency in being sure that you really get everything you can out of Penn State? And finally, to my question about the world campus and distance learners, as we have massive open online courses that are now seeking to enroll 40,000 students, is that really going to be equivalent to a Penn State education? So how can we at Penn State be distinctive in offering a robust curriculum to online students of the future? I hope you'll leave today with this commitment to not just check off boxes, those 128 credits, or think about your Penn State education as only those credits, but think about becoming the architect of your own education and leaving here with more than a degree, leaving Penn State with an education. Thank you very much.